Players, and they are staging the Chelsea Area Players production of The Only Man in Town. We have co-producer Michael Cicerelli along with the lead actor Steve Pierce. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, Michael, good to see you
Good seeing
again.
you.
Steve,
Yep.
welcome.
Yep.
Michael actually
Glad
worked
to
here
be
at
here.
JTV a few years ago, and now you're off in the health industry.
Yeah, I'm working as a registered nurse now. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, I know you've always been involved. You were involved in community theater here
Yep.
in
And I
Jackson.
still, like I said, I'm still getting involved with that, and this is really like the first show behind the scenes that I've been a part of post-COVID. So it's been a few years, but I'm very excited to get back into things again with theater.
Cool. So I'm excited to hear about The Only Man in Town. What is that?
So The Only Man in Town is actually an original musical composed by the local playwright Jason Eister. So this is actually about a businessman by the name of Frank Glazier and his family. And so essentially this takes place in 1890s Chelsea, Michigan. So Chelsea's, a little bit familiar a little bit.
That's
so it's
why
kind of
the tower's in the picture.
there's the Chelsea clock tower there. That is an actual picture of Frank and his daughter Vera. And so this is basically talking about the story of Frank Glazier and his family, of his bid of making Chelsea better. He eventually becomes I believe Secretary of State, and he's trying to get a governor bid, but he is actually caught in an embezzlement ring of trying to pay his employees.
Uh-oh. And you play the part, Steve, of Frank?
Yes.
And it's a period piece, so the dress, you're in costume right now, right?
I did the bow tie myself.
Beautiful job.
Third time in my life.
So the role, what was it about the part that attracted you?
Honestly, my friend Marla is the vocal director, and she asked me to audition. And I grew up in Ann Arbor, so back in simpler times, I used to ride my bike through Dexter to Chelsea. I had a Jiffy Mix field trip in elementary school, and so I'm sympathetic to historic things, and it might have just been meant to be because there are a lot of parallels. I like to think of myself as a businessman. I'm an investment manager, but my passion is music. So before I washed out of that, and I felt like I couldn't do it because it wasn't practical, I've sung all the while, but never believed in myself until fairly recently when I had some, I guess I was tested, some struggles, and then I realized life is short and I'm gonna do what I wanna do, and I don't have to pick between the two. I'm gonna sing and be a businessman and not worry that clients will think I'm not serious. So Frank is a businessman. I can relate to the ambition. His empire was about to collapse. He was the state treasurer, so he was privy to some authority to use money, and he used it in an improper way to save his empire and to finance buildings.
So it's a musical based on a true story.
Yep, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, and it takes place, I think it starts in 1893 in Chelsea, and it goes all the way up to 1912. So it's got that Gilded Age sort of era and feel to it. So as you can see when you see the costumes and the tech of what is going on, you can see this. So it's a bit of a time machine and a little bit of 120 some years ago.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah.
And
Like captains of industry, strong, virile men building things.
well, Steve, when you look at Chelsea, it looks like a town that, downtown, it looks like it hasn't changed in 100 years.
Yeah, some of the buildings, they're still are original from way back in the day too. I mean, I'm sure there's been some improvements or something on the inside, but some of the outside feel like sometimes it's almost like a time warp of back in that era too.
Steve, we had a chance to talk just a minute before the show. The story of your character, Frank, he experiences, it's a tragic story, right?
It is, yeah.
Something bad happens, and you had a personal connection because you yourself have gone through a personal tragedy.
Yeah, I had 5 kids, a girl on each end and 3 boys in the middle. My oldest son liked to go downtown and climb on things, and he fell off the back of a parking structure on election day when they had the day off in 2016. And I didn't fully appreciate the tie-in to the story until I got into the weeds and I realized that I was going to have to do a scene where I lose my child. And I guess I can relate to the ambition of Frank, and I can relate to the loss. It really solidifies what you find important in life. And for me, it increased the value of my life. That's what I've kind of winnowed this expression and the effect down to, is the value. Because the value of my life increased a lot, and the time I have left on this earth is much more valuable than it had been.
Well, I think many of us remember that tragedy, and our sympathies to you.
Thank you.
It was horrible.
Thank you.
We're sorry to hear about that. So you've got a musical that has some tragedy
Yep.
in it. That's not typical musicals.
No, so I mean, I think there are definitely elements of tragedy, but there is also a lot of comedy involved as well. So it's it does have a healthy mix of both. I mean, it is mostly there is mostly some comedy of the kind of like that 1890s kind of gimmick a little bit, but as Steve said before, there is tragedy specifically in that second act.
So a history buff, someone interested in history, Chelsea history, for example, they'd love
Oh,
this.
absolutely,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
would. Yep.
There used to be a 10-acre factory complex, but it's covered in the musical. It burnt down. So if you go to Chelsea now, there's no more factory. There's a remnant Glazier Stove Company, but there was much more there, and there was a saloon, and there were angry people who didn't want drinking, and there was a mob where there was gambling, and it brought all this riffraff into town, and people were upset, and they brought the equipment onto the street and destroyed it, and it's just hard to imagine it today.
All right, so was Chelsea a wild town?
It sounded like that it was back in the history books. But yeah, many of the events that you see in The Only Men in Town are based on true events from back in the day.
How big is your cast, Michael?
We have probably about, I would say, 26-ish or so, between 25 and 30.
Oh.
And then we also have a lot of, with the staff and crew, kind of from everywhere from, like I said, Chelsea. I know we've had some people actually all the way towards Detroit, but we also have people from Jackson, including, from what I saw from Juneteenth, our very own Larry Sumner Jr. is is in the pit doing
wow.
keyboards.
Well, there you go. You can't beat Larry Sumner's Jr.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you've been in other shows, Steve, right?
Yeah, most recently I was Captain Von Trapp with the Spotlight Players
You
in
look
Canton.
Yeah.
And that was, well, I was kind of oppressed like we all were during COVID, and I sang in my sister's son's 2 weddings. One first weekend in June, one third weekend in June. When I came back, there was a notice for auditions, and I auditioned at the last minute. 6 p.m. I got a call at 10 a.m. the next morning. We want you to do Captain Von Trapp. And like a lot of us, and even myself, I'm a little affected because I'm a man, and I feel like that's so tender, that musical, and I can't like talk about how much I love it too much. But it was instrumental in my love for music. And here I am. I get the privilege of playing the lead role, and it was amazing to me.
So the music, I would imagine, is original.
Yep. Everything is original. Yep. And kind of going history a little bit of the making of Only Man in Town itself. I think Jason started making this, probably since like the 80s, like just having that idea stuck in his head. And then he kind of did his first draft, I believe, in like 2017, 18-ish, and then we actually did a staged reading of it back in 2019. And as you can see, there's a photo of that right there. So that is actually our very first rehearsal over at the St. Mary Catholic Church in Chelsea, where we had our majority of rehearsals of what we do. Of course, Only Man of Town is at Chelsea High School, but for the vast majority we use that. And then over here, this is actually the Sitz Probe of the show itself. So the Sitz Probe, it's basically the first rehearsal with the actors singing with the orchestra. So this is them in action of what is going on. That was just this past Sunday.
Oh, wow.
doing that. So that was something that I had borrowed from my time over at Ann Arbor Civic Theater when I was in shows doing that. And I'm like, you know what, this Sitzprobe's a great idea. I'm gonna go take it over to Chelsea.
So you're standing. You're actually that's physically where you are on stage. The pit in front of the.
Yep. So the pit. Yep. So the pit is there's like a 20-foot drop or something with the pit of where that is, and then and then we're on the Chelsea High School stage.
All right. Show days and times.
Yes. Show dates are June 9th through 11th. So that's this weekend. And so June 9th and 10th are at 7:30 p.m. and June 11th Sunday is at 3 p.m. You can get your tickets at chelseaareaplayers.org. They are $20 a piece.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a full house and a great show.
So far, it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. I hope to see it myself.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yes, thank you so
bet.
much.
Steve, break a leg.
Thanks so much. Great privilege for me.
It is the Chelsea Area Players production of The Only Man in Town, starring Steve Pierce and co-produced by Michael Cicerelli.